when you think about the idea that perhaps some pilots don't feel comfortable coming forward because it means they'll be barred from the cockpit, talk about some of what goes into some of the decision making behind this, and perhaps some of the support that you think would benefit some of these pilots.
Well, yeah, some of them really don't have a lot of faith or trust in the FAA, and that's understandable. But keep in mind, too, the majority of U.S. airline pilots have labor unions, ALPA, APA, SWAPA, and these are more safety organizations, every bit as much as they are labor organizations. So that's probably the refuge they should take, because they have professionals who can work with that. Let's keep in mind this is a very, very small percentage of people in that pilot population.
How does this change, if at all, the existing kind of the training, the work through that for a lot of commercial airlines, and you were mentioning kind of that part of this larger figure, how they evaluate and make sure that pilots are fit for even going through training in order to get onto some of the flight schedules?
Well, now we have systems. If a pilot is fired at one airline, there's basically a database that will tell another airline what happened there, supposedly. So we have that safeguard in place, and that was from some accidents that happened back in the 90s. So it's getting better, but we're dealing with humans, and humans do crazy things. The Chinese captain that actually co-pilot at that point who flew an airplane straight into the ground in China, there were no indications he had any problems other than being demoted. We don't know. We're all human, and these things can happen, but it's not something the consumer should be really worried about.
And Mike, obviously, this is something that people would have to self-report. But as you mentioned there, if you're saying that this isn't perhaps a broader problem, but in terms of sort of the checks and balances that are out there for pilots, especially since there was a pilot shortage, you had COVID a lot of times when, you weren't seeing a lot of pilots getting trained. How much pressure are pilots under on a day-to-day basis?
Well, they're under probably as much pressure as before. The problem is they may be doing some more flying, but, keep in mind, there are limits to what they can fly. Now, there's always been arguments between airline crew schedulers and pilots. That goes back to ancient times, I think. But the reality of this is that there are limits to what they can fly. And airlines, and particularly pilots' unions, are working very hard to make sure pilots aren't flying out there tired and hungry, if you will.
How can airline operators do better at even baking in counseling services, baking in things that pilots are afraid to self-report in order to make sure that everyone's in the right headspace as they're going about the operation?
I think airlines have that, but again, they don't get credit for it, but airline pilots unions have systems like this also for their members, because like I say, airline pilots unions are as much safety organizations as they are labor organizations. So pilots do have options there, and you're going to find some people who will lie in every population, every type of category of work. There will be a few pilots that'll be lying to get around the system, no question about it, but it's no different than bankers or people who work out in the field.